Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I am your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could please down below, like, comment, subscribe. What did you think of Chainsaw Man, the Reze arc? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I want to know. Everyone else, remember, everything we review will always have full spoilers. So if you haven't seen this yet, or season one, go watch those like as soon as you can. Honestly, it's a pretty big deal in terms of anime and shonen anime. But if you are somehow someone that hasn't been following, the show and doesn't want the spoilers, like I said, go ahead and get out of here. As for everyone else, what is this about? Chainsaw Man faces his deadliest battle yet in a brutal war between devils, hunters, and secret enemies. That is so incredibly broad. That is the description right here, though. But this really does follow Denji as he sort of makes his way through a romance in this film with Reze. I want to get this right off my chest right now, though. I've read the manga. I want to say that because I want to tell you that I am going to review this without mentioning anything going forward. This is going to mention season one and the movie itself. I'm telling you that because within the community of people that read Chainsaw Man, they really like to spoil it, and I just don't want to do that for you. I want to just be able to get into this by itself. And the irony being for this show is I love it a lot. That's not the ironic part. I love it a lot, and I think it does require you to also appreciate shonen anime just in general. And I'll get into why in a second. It's kind of like if I were to equate The Boys to superhero-related media. I think that Chainsaw Man has such a distinct visual identity and feeling, not just visual, but also in terms of emotion and how it approaches its own characters. I think that this show really, really works for people who also love other shonen, much like myself, because I love My Hero Academia. I love Demon Slayer. You've probably seen my review for the movie that I loved that a lot as well. I love Jujutsu Kaisen and Dragon Ball Z, all of these things I'm a huge fan of. And I think that they amplify my love for Chainsaw Man, because Chainsaw Man is basically, if you were to say, what's the boys' answer to superhero media? I'm not saying that it's above it or better than it because it criticizes it. I am saying that it is a complement in terms of genre, in terms of the type of anime that it is to other shonen, in that they are sort of siblings to each other in the sense that Denji, the main character, I really want to focus on him. But before I even get any further, did I love this? Did I hate this? Or am I somewhere between on this? I loved it. I loved it a lot. I have been on, anything anime related, I think I've reviewed on here. Aside from the Hashira training arc, I liked. And I'm rewatching that again right now, and it's still very much like, it's good. But I think that they've been on a really killer streak with anime released media, because I don't know. I think that it's just since it's become more popular due to, and you gotta admit, it's Demon Slayer that did this, where with Mugen Train, where it's a season, then a movie, then a season, and then maybe they throw in another movie in there somewhere. But I think that this particular arc really lends itself to a cinematic adaptation because of the way in which it's paced. I was really surprised by it because it's been a while since I've seen season one, but I will tell you, when season one came out, I saw it rewatched it like 3 separate times. I loved it. I believe I'm blanking on the name, but the mangaka is the name of it. Yes. The author very, very clearly wears the inspiration of Tarantino and the Coen brothers on his sleeve. And I think even with the Coen brothers sort of send up in terms of introducing plot elements that are quickly discarded in favor of shock, but not in terms of shock value in that you're like, oh, brother. Like, maybe sometimes The Boys is accused of that and does that, where somebody just blows up just because, and you're like, well, let me guess, like, this season they're all gonna end up in blood and that. But like, I love The Boys, don't get me wrong, but with this, I think that it does follow that Coen Brothers thing, like I said, of the certain types of plot elements. He's so clearly inspired by American media. Even, the Chainsaw Man. I think I'm wearing a Spider-Man shirt, actually, yeah. But also kind of a send-up of powers in that he doesn't really utilize his to the smartest capabilities. It's even a plot point in this movie. But I think that what made this movie so profoundly interesting for me is that it is a tragic love story. I was blanking on the manga because I didn't remember it quite that well because I read it a while back, but I was like, isn't Reze like the twist villain in this to an extent? And then sure enough, right away I was like in the middle of the movie, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. And what I think is really interesting is, in order to get into why I think this works so well and differentiates itself, is that Denji as a character is what I would call deceptively simplistic. And the reason why I think it's important that you've seen other shonen is because other shonen, it relies on a lot of kind-hearted and selfless people that have, maybe they're fresh to their world, they're new to their world, but they quickly adapt to it and they want to be the strongest, they want to be the best. Like Asta wants to be the strongest because he has no magic, or same thing with Deku, he wants to be the strongest, but he has no powers until he gets All Might's power. Even to an extent, Tanjiro in Demon Slayer. But I'm not saying all that to criticize those. I'm saying all that to bring up the point that they are very honorable because of the way in which they are grown within the world. Denji, however, grew up with nothing around him. He knows nothing about the world. He has a very simplistic view of the world. He wants to do just a couple of things. He wants to eat, and he wants to be able to touch a woman's boobs. And that's the overall driving force at the beginning of the narrative here. And I know that whenever this initially was coming out, that some people are like, oh, it's just like this like horny teenage boy anime. And I think it is deceptive about that because it is really about so much more. I think that Denji having animalistic tendencies makes him so naive and easily manipulated by the world around him. I think that this one touches on that quite a bit. It utilizes his wants and needs that are so, bare minimum person that it's so easy to be matched up with what he wants. It's so easy to manipulate him. And they also, like, Reze even says at the end, like, that it's really easy to, or no, I think it's Aki who says this while they're in the car, that it's like, it's really easy to trick him because he's so gullible, because he just wants attention from a girl at the end of the day. And I think having a 16-year-old main character like that, I think is very clever because of the specific type of plot element that it adds. Something that Chainsaw Man does very effectively and very well is, I think, that it always has this undercurrent of something is wrong. Like something is wrong within the events as they're taking place. Something is happening under the surface that's coming to a boiling point, that's about to explode. Irony or pun on purpose this time. And I think that even very early on, I think that, every shonen anime, every anime has like, its staple like favorite characters. I love Aki, I love Denji. Power is not in this really much at all. She's in like 2 scenes, I think. And Makima's a great character. So is he's in season 1 quite a bit. But there's a meme of him that he's like holding this sign up. But I think that the tone here really separates it from other anime as well. But really getting into the story itself, what I liked a lot about this really was the romance aspect of it. It is doomed by the end of it, but the setup of it, I think that we spend so much time with Reze and we spend so much time with Denji and their connection and them communicating with each other. I was kind of surprised by how much time I think this movie took to develop its core main characters and the center arc that's happening here. And I think what surprised me so much about that is because Denji as a character, I found part of this movie more understated than I thought it was going to be. And that's the first initial part where it wants you to take the romance very seriously. If you've seen season 1, you know how Denji is as a character. So when we're first introduced to this, the fact that like it really does build up in terms of I feel like then now this also wants to kind of subvert, the romance anime part of it, where they do kind of have a meet cute where they meet, and then she's talking about how they can develop feelings for each other. They were going through this at like a cafe, and he shows up there, and he's very like, he has this flower that he eats initially earlier, because part of it early on, he wonders, there's this really kind of intimate moment that I thought was really interesting and low key, where him and Makima are marathoning these movies, and he's like, I don't get this, I don't get this, I don't get this one either. And he's like, maybe I just don't like movies. And which I think crazy thing to say, I'm just saying. But the final movie they see, it brings a tear to his eye, and it brings a tear to Makima's eyes as well, and they both start crying. And then towards this, at a certain extent, he asks her, do you think I have a heart? And she listens, and you hear the heartbeat, and she says, yes, you have a heart. And of course that, like, Denji's very like woman seeking approval needed, and it makes him much happier. But I think that his place in this world, I think that the fact that he's so, kind of kicked to the curb sometimes, he can be obnoxious. It's part of his character. It's part of his whole thing that he's very, very juvenile in what he wants and what he needs. But he's not really ever taught to seek anything else. He comes to this on his own accord. He realizes that other things, he starts wanting more and more things, and this is very like growing as a person. It's very like stunted growth, but it is for him, and it's a very big deal, which I like a lot just as an idea in terms of him growing as a character. And he does face this conflict of like, oh no, now I have two women that I have to choose between. It's either going to be Makima or Reze, up until, of course, he finds out that Reze is in fact the bomb devil. And what I liked about this setup a lot is, if you didn't know the actual, inner workings of the mechanics of the plot here, I think that what really works is they introduce this serial killer type that made a contract with the Typhoon Devil. But when he's introduced, he's killed almost immediately, which is why I referenced the Coen brothers, because that is exactly something that they would do in one of their movies, which I can see that inspiration so clearly. And I thought that scene was really effective and well done, and it does also add what I think is sometimes portrayed in this world and also conveyed in its animation. Really talking about the animation style, I could easily just tell you, oh, it looks amazing. It does. It very much does. But I think that the animation style here is really scratchy and sketchy. And I think part of the reason why is to make the world feel like it has this really kind of bursting at the seams edge to it. Like everything is held together by a thread almost, and everything is going to come collapsing down if one thing happens. I feel like whenever I watch Chainsaw Man, I feel like everything is about to implode on itself sometimes. And I think that adds a real type of genuine narrative danger to it, which is why I think that, I know in season 1 there's some naysayers about the animation of season 1, which I think you're insane if you say that, but there are manga purists that are like that, but I can't say that I can see that. But for this particular movie, I think that the even thinner line animation and the really like, it reminded me a lot of that One Piece arc, where he punches the dragon, the celestial dragon. That specific kind of type of line work, I think, is really kind of like fluid and moves all over the place and really expands on its sketches. And I think that amplifies and adds to the attitude here that's portrayed in this particular movie, which also leads me into wanting to talk about the action, which again is one of those things where I'm like, what am I going to say, that the action is bad? I feel like I hardly say that about anime. There are some fights that are letdowns. I can think of a couple arcs that are in Black Clover where the budget was definitely lower, maybe Seven Deadly Sins, but here what I also think is kind of a subversive compliment to shonen anime is they never announce their moves. They will, cut each other off. They'll like kill each other in the middle of like them about to do something. And there's an action scene towards the end with the bomb devil that I think is like almost abstract in terms of what it's doing. It starts to get really, really colorful and all over the place, and the explosions are almost like, you know how they do the little square paneling for really like rapid movement sometimes? It starts doing that, but then you can also see it, and then it starts recreating one of the manga covers from Chainsaw Man. It's almost like it overloads you with the amount of action happening at once, and I think your brain is almost like trying to catch up with the movement itself, with the actual events that are happening in front of you. But I think none of that would have worked. It would have been visual spectacle and it would have looked cool if it weren't for its really, really patient first two acts. And I have to respect that the first two acts of this are very, very patient in terms of developing a genuine romance with the character itself. And I cannot help it. I feel so bad for Denji every time I'm reminded of like the type of character he is and what he goes through. And here, I think at the end, once there's a ending where they're on the beach, and I think that it's a quieter moment with him where she's like, you think that I really liked you all of this time? And then he says something along the lines of like, well, you did teach me how to swim. He says that earlier, but then he brings this thing up where he's like, why didn't you kill me when you first saw me? And she repeats this line later after the fact. She's like, and then she starts chasing him back because he says that he's going to be at the cafe. And you realize maybe after all this time, maybe there was a real connection in terms of that. Maybe there was actual genuine emotion and feelings between Reze and Denji. But it's, far too little, far too late, because of course Makima gets in the way. And she says that she also likes the city mouse, or the field mouse. And I thought that was really well done, because you're like, oh, how is she hearing all of that? How does she know about that event happening in the first place? And you can see her also drinking coffee as well at the same time that they're talking about the initial like, oh, I don't like coffee. I think it tastes like it's from the gutter. And there's a lot of small implications that are like that about her particular character. Like, what does that mean? What is that trying to say? Because even whenever Reze mentions, she's like, oh, he says that like, oh, I still have Makima, and she's like, oh, if that witch has you in her grasp, there's like nothing I can even do for you. And of course you're wondering like, what does that mean? And then she kills Reze like really, really easily at the end, like within seconds of it. And I think that the really kind of poetic part of it is at the very end, whenever they're talking about school, and it's very much, the way it's playing out is very much two people's idea of what school is, maybe through media, but maybe not what school is actually like. And she says something at the end that she's like, well, to be honest with you, I've never been to school either. And that's the last line. And I think that last line is brilliant because it says so much without saying a lot. They talk about how she didn't really have a life herself because she was part of the Soviet program, and she maybe actually genuinely connected with him and saw herself in him a little bit because they were coming from similar backgrounds, but the circumstances of their lives got in the way of it all in the end. She ends up being kind of this doomed antagonist as well, where first you kind of want to hate her because of, manipulating Denji to a specific extent up until it gets to the final lines, and then it's sort of subverted in its own kind of interesting way in terms of storytelling, and you end up thinking about Reze as kind of like a doomed sort of character in the sense of maybe that could have gone somewhere. Maybe they could have actually sought each other out to a certain extent, but that's just not the circumstances in which they set up for themselves, which I think is really, really well done and ends up being a kind of really interesting tragedy in its own way about the romance that's being told here. And I think it's interesting that this is the type of anime that it is, because it does do all that, and then it leans into the action part of it where, he's Chainsaw Man, he's riding a shark through a typhoon, and it's like the most insane thing you've ever seen. It's very, very cool. And I think that the action there is done really well, and I think that the characters really set this world apart from other things, just generally speaking, because this does feel darker in tone than a lot of other anime. Like, Attack on Titan obviously has its very, very serious subject matter. Here, it's approached very seriously, but obviously the characters sometimes are juvenile themselves, so they don't take everything as seriously as maybe they should, which I think adds a lot of personality to it, to be honest with you. Like, I think that the sort of buddy cop thing that Angel and Aki have here is really interesting. They have their own sort of moderate subplot going on, where Angel is talking about how he's like not really, he's ready to die, and he doesn't feel really fully connected to the world around him, and I really like that sort of subplot thing going on where Aki's talking about to this friend where he's like, oh, why don't you come back to this division 5 years from now? I'll be, I think it's like chief of something, and I'll promote you. And then he's asking him like, well, why didn't you tell him? And he's like, I'm not gonna do that, which I think is interesting readings for these characters that maybe aren't the focus this time around, because maybe they will later, or maybe they just didn't, because this movie's pretty singular in terms of the plot points and the characters that are at the forefront. And I think that there's a lot in Chainsaw Man that's being said without really being said, which shows a lot of narrative restraint for a full payoff later, I think, which I think is really, really cool, because to practice that specific type of not telling your audience what's going on, especially for an action anime, is really well done. And of course, getting to the designs, they look amazing. Of course, the Bomb Devil is very cool, and the boom thing with the lights flickering while she snaps is beautiful and really well done imagery. And I like the gory parts of it as well, because it's just really well done and really well animated and abstract in terms of what's happening. But for now, I think, without going forward into what happens at the events after, I think that the movie itself, it was a very smart part of the manga to adapt, because it's really well done and it's really, really well paced. And I think that the forefront narrative of the romance, specifically between Reze and Denji, is incredible. And there's a moment, the moment in the school, I think, is brilliant. There's a moment where she teaches him how to swim. And yes, it is played up as like, it's the kind of like, I didn't even really feel like fan service though. And I want to call that out of the way right now, because I know that maybe even on social media, you're going to see like, oh, this moment was such like a fan servicey type of thing. I don't think so. I thought that that was more of a representation of specifically Denji being maybe just needing some sort of kind of human intimacy and interaction. And yes, of course, he responds to it in a kind of juvenile way at first, but he really does learn something from it. He learns how to swim, but that's not really the important part. I think the important part is that someone taught him how to do something that is maybe something you learn when you're a kid, but it showed even a fraction of human warmth and a human connection towards somebody else, and why that's important, and not just like the whole he's like, oh, I'm horny type of thing, but really like treating him like a person with feelings to an extent, and not just as the Chainsaw Man, but as Denji, which is part of the core component of this entire story. Is, can anyone see him for him, like who he is as a person underneath all that? He doesn't need just like the Chainsaw Man recognition. He is a person that eventually wants to be recognized and to be expressed empathy for. It's why there's a line where he's like, everybody wants Chainsaw Man's heart, but how about Tenji's heart? Does anybody want Denji's heart? And I think that is really well done in terms of being shown, not just said. Of course it's said, but I think that it's really well done being shown in the context of this as well. Even the guy that follows him around, the shark guy, like, where I completely blanked that he's been following him for so long. So when she bites off his tongue during the fireworks, which is really cinematic and really well done, and then he pops up out of nowhere when she does that, because she's trying to leave him for dead. But him even praising him to an extent, but the Chainsaw Lord, or Lord Chainsaw, or Chainsaw Man, not him though, I think is a very specific plot point that is driven home that I liked a lot. But yes, I loved this movie a lot. I also respected that it felt, I mean, I've seen the show quite a bit and I love the show, but I don't know why I was like, I'm so surprised that this is like taking a very mature route, when even like adaptation wise, it could have gone for maybe playing up the silliness of Denji even more, but it didn't. It held back, and the character growth and the world around him growing, I really, really, really like. And I cannot wait for season 2. I'm also going to give this much like I did Demon Slayer. Another perfect score. I'm going to give this a 5 out of 5 for Chainsaw Man, the Reze arc. I loved this. I thought it was quite fantastic. What did you think of Chainsaw Man, the Reze arc? Are you excited for season 2? If you are going to tell me that you love the manga, just say that. I will delete a comment that spoils anything going forward, just because we can spoil this movie in season 1, but I don't want to ruin anything happening from here on out forward. But what did you think of this? What are you looking forward to the next season? I hope you are. I definitely am. Up next, though, is going to be, oh man, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. I am super excited for it. I've heard great things. I cannot wait. In the meantime, though, in order to stay tuned for that, please like, comment, and subscribe. One more time, what did you think of Chainsaw Man, the Reze arc? Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Until next time, I'll see you later.